In today's world, we are increasingly dependent on technology. Our business and personal lives rely on it, but as you've probably noticed, it's unreliable. Our computers are slow, so we end up squinting at smartphones and tablets. The jokers we pay to fix our stuff have no clue what they're doing. We live in constant fear that something's going to happen to our personal data. So we're scared into paying for fake protection that proves useless when disaster strikes. Update attacks, fake Wi-Fi, cloud control, intelligent, successful people feel intimidated by the chaos and think it's somehow their fault. If they only knew what the industry was doing to them, they'd get torches and pitchforks. If only we had someone to explain it all in plain English so we can start protecting ourselves. Oh wait, we do! It's the Computer Exorcist Podcast with your host, Mark Anthony Arena.
From the Wallace Memorial microphone in my home office, overlooking the can of worms in downtown Rochester, New York, this is the Computer Exorcist Podcast. My name is Mark Anthony Arena. I am so glad you have joined me today. Happy holidays and prosperous New Year. I hope we all have a great 2025. I actually had an awesome 2024. I got my deck installed in the backyard and I got my kitchen installed and everything, but then toward the end it was awful. I was in the rare occasion that I went downtown. My beautiful Hyundai Tucson was stolen brazenly in broad daylight in front of cameras in a beautiful parking lot by guys whose faces were just completely visible in HD on the cameras, because it turns out Rochester, New York has no laws against car theft. It's hysterical. And nobody in the entire gosh darn city has a brain. And none of the politicians realize if they create a consequence for it, it would stop. I am not kidding. If you steal a car in Rochester, New York, you get an appearance ticket. It's basically a speeding ticket. But heaven forbid I do any little thing wrong, or if your restaurant gives out styrofoam takeout boxes or whatever, you're roasted. The federal government just did something recently where if you don't register on this incredibly cryptic, difficult website, you are fined $500 a day and forever and ever. But yeah, go ahead and steal Kias. Go right ahead and steal cars because it's totally fine. So it is my greatest hope, more than ever. I mean, it's always been my lifelong dream to escape this evil, rotten city, but I am working extra hard. I was starting to work hard this fall, and now I'm going to work extra hard to get out of here, and I hope the whole city just implodes and goes back to farmland. So if any y'all in Rochester want to look for a Hyundai Tucson, let me know if you find one. Okay. Wasn't our discussion with Jamari last week phenomenal? What a brilliant guy. I'm just so thrilled to know him. I'm so thrilled to know so many wonderful people. And I hope y'all had a great time with that one. So today we're going to do another catch-up episode. I got a lot of articles here in the briefcase, and we will go right ahead and do that. And apologies, I'm also icing on the cake getting over a horrible flu. So bear with me. KimCommando.com, July 2019. And look, these folks, I was the first Tech Talk host starting in 2012 to call out this industry on its garbage. It wasn't until many years later that the rest of the hosts like Leo Laporte and Kim Commando decided to go from, oh, you should buy the latest and greatest, which is what you did in the 90s because products actually improved, to, oh, wow, look at this. This company is actually a filthy, rotten nightmare and is recording everything we do, and we should call them out on it. So hopefully these Tech Talk hosts are now using their platforms to protect people and to raise awareness for the evil, legalized spying that this industry does. So thanks to Kim for this article, July 2019. Avoid this popular web browser that collects and shares your data. As it turns out, one of the most popular browsers on the internet was revealed to be sharing personal data with one of the biggest names in tech, Microsoft. Not only is this browser reporting your activity, but it's also sharing unfiltered browsing history and attaching your username to it. If you're using this browser right now, you might want to try an alternative. That's very polite. I wouldn't have been that polite. On Windows 10 PCs and newer, Microsoft Edge is automatically set as the default browser. Edge was created to replace the infamously insecure Internet Explorer, and since then it's amassed a sizable user base. Well, I want to add to this, Kim, and I talk about this in my 2017 book. There was originally old Edge, which they claimed was a ground up from scratch redo, but it turns out every day when the feds release thousands of security alarms, the Edge had the same problems as Internet Explorer. So it was nothing more than Internet Explorer with spray paint. So they decided to more or less steal Google Chrome and mutilate it and turn it into New Edge. And by the way, anyone who's used a Windows 10 or 11 machine knows how viciously, relentlessly, desperately Microsoft drools and attacks and forces you to use Edge, no matter how hard you fight against it. There's 90 steps to turn off Edge. I'm the only one in the world who created a script to delete Edge. And it turns out after I created that script, Edge respawns like a vicious virus over and over and over. So I created a script that disables Edge, then deletes it, and then I drill a hole in the Edge folder so that whenever it respawns, it just goes down the toilet, so to speak. It's such a beautiful thing. So contact me for that if you are a technician, and I can deploy that to you, and you can start protecting people against this Edge malware. Again, the definition of malware is something that spies on you and records you and slows your computer down and hassles you and profits off of you and sells your behavior. Edge is malware by all moral logic. Okay? Morally, it is malware. Microsoft Edge was found to be sending the full URLs of websites you visit to a company database, along with your Microsoft account username. Microsoft knows the places you're visiting, as well as the fact that it's you. Not to mention, Microsoft accounts are created by the user during the PC's initial setup, so there isn't really a way around the company knowing who you are unless you're aware of the data sharing before booting for the first time. That's actually not true, Kim. If you buy a new Windows machine, there's a secret to protecting yourself from the Microsoft account scandal bullying at the beginning. Depending on if it's 10 or 11, there's a secret method. Obscuring URLs is exactly what competing anti-phishing services do in other browsers. Firefox and Chrome also collect URLs and compare them with a database of known fraud sites, but the information they share is encrypted for your protection. So there are zero reasons for Microsoft to be sending this data in an inferior and dangerous format. So, if you already don't hate Edge enough, that's more reasons to hate Edge. I've been saying this for a while, and that's the article that backs it up. Edge records everything you do, gives it to Microsoft for sale. Okay, next one, June 2021, Windows 11 confirmed, what we learned from the leaked build. Okay, and this is of course a couple years old, but they talk about all the new things that Windows 11 offers. And as always, instead of real fundamentally new features, it's just recycled garbage and duct tape that's slapped on top of the old product. Because nobody has any conscious brain or conscious thought or patience. They're just these pea-brains who want to do snap decisions and want to kick the can down the road as much as possible. So Microsoft Windows, as always, is just a bigger and bigger and bigger tinfoil ball or pile of chewing gum. Easy window management with Snap. That's actually terrifying. Snap in Windows 11 means if you're dragging a window around the screen, it'll just explode and attach itself to one corner of the screen and then explode. And this happens at random as you move it around, so it's one of the many things I disable with Windows 11. But what about the rest of Windows 10X? Unfortunately, there's no indication that Windows 11 includes one of Windows 10X's most exciting features. And if you remember, the other day we talked about Windows 10X and how it was canned before it even came out because they got impatient and they were too eager and obsessed with releasing Windows 11 and they were too impatient. So there's no indication that Windows 11 includes one of 10X's most exciting features, the ability to run apps inside a container for security reasons, providing better protection from rootkit malware and buggy applications that can crash your whole operating system. Again, why would they want you to have any kind of security and stability when they could just infect you with stupidity like Snap, which explodes and shatters and moves windows around the screen and terrifies the user? because that's easier. Okay, remember, read the book Why Software Sucks. It's increasingly relevant by the day in this industry. It should be the Bible of this industry. Are the changes just skin deep? So is Windows 11 really a big change? Our sister site Review Geek is branding it a lightly skinned Windows 10. Want a local account? That costs extra. So, well, actually, I mean, yes, you could hire me to do a local account, which protects you against the Microsoft account that we just talked about a few minutes ago. They're saying that it's hard to create a local account with Windows 11. With Windows 11 Pro, you pay a little extra, and then you're allowed to do, it's a secret procedure to click around, and eventually you're allowed to do local account. But any version of Windows 11, you can hit Shift F10, that's the secret, and you type in secret commands, and then it reboots, and then you're allowed to protect yourself from that Microsoft account treachery. It's a giant security hole, where your Microsoft account stores all your data in a completely naked cloud that has virtually zero security. Okay, so again, if y'all buy a new computer, don't turn it on without me. Okay, otherwise you'll be bullied into the Microsoft account scandal, and they'll start sucking your behavior and your documents without your express consent. Is this the last version of Windows? Microsoft's Jerry Nixon famously called Windows 10 the last version of Windows before it was released. And now Microsoft is releasing a new version of Windows. So let's face it, Windows as a service was a bad idea anyway. So that's the deal. Again, they're also obsessed with change for the sake of change. And everything is about change, and you need to get with the program, and you need to be milked for revenue. Okay, it's just like a hammer. Nobody's going to rent a hammer. Okay, you buy a hammer $10 one time instead of renting it for $9 a year because it doesn't change. It's the same thing with an operating system and the same thing with a word processor. Those products don't change. So I know the jokers at Microsoft want to change their own evil products to justify the fake rental fee, but it's just not necessary. I actually tell clients to stay with their operating system for at least 10 years. There is no benefit whatsoever to upgrading your operating system. It's only when you absolutely have to, when third parties start bullying you to get with the program, then fine, we reluctantly upgrade, and then we turn off all the new anti-features that the latest, filthiest version of Windows contains. So yeah, Windows 11 is just a horribly reskinned, filthier version of Windows 10 with more chaos. It's a lot less clean, it's a lot more cluttered, and it's a lot more unethical. Okay, it's a lot nastier as far as violating your privacy. Okay, last article from listener Matt, Wall Street Journal, and this is actually December 2024, so this is an up-to-date one, and pretty cool one about one of my heroes in the industry. Not because he does anything special, it's because he does nothing special. He just focuses. He's pretty much the only guy in the industry, come to think of it, aside from Lenovo people over there, who just focuses on doing what he's supposed to do and doing it right, instead of coming up with dumb, harebrained schemes or cheating people or coming up with, reaching out and trying too hard or coming up with dumb cut corner ways to cheat and cut corners, okay? And that's Michael Dell. He just focuses on making reliable computers. I was a critic back in the late 90s, early 2000s of Dell because I didn't like how they were quote-unquote commoditizing the industry. They were able to beat anyone for price to performance. I was building handmade PCs and selling them, and people would say, I could just get a cheaper one at Dell. And I have to remind them, well, Dell's got all integrated peripherals. So if your sound card dies or your video card dies, you're stuck. So I still always prefer handmade PCs with replaceable components. But anyway, if you're going to buy a brand name computer, Dell and Lenovo are my favorites because of that. Acer is pretty decent as well. But I just love the fact that Dell has self-control. Again, he's one of the few people in this entire harebrained, slap-happy slob industry who has a brain and self-control. He has patience. And because of that, he's able to do a lot of things in business, take a lot of calculated risks that other people criticize him for. And that's funny how that works, right? He does quiet risks, and everyone else is doing dumb risks that end up losing them. So look at HP with their Slate tablet and their Stream laptops and all the dumb stupidity that HP does. And they waste billions and billions. How about when they bought EDS and then a couple years later they had to do a multi-million billion dollar write-off? I mean, every possible product and every business deal that HP does is a nightmare. Okay. Michael Dell spent 40 years preparing for an AI boom no one expected. December 2024. The man who founded Dell in a Texas dorm room has transformed his company. It's not just about PCs anymore. Michael Dell is pulling off one of the most surprising transformations in the history of tech at the company that bears his name. While selling PCs and peripherals still accounts for about half of the company's revenue, please never change. Please don't ever change, Dell. Please never change. I mean, I get 20-year-old Dell computers in my recycle pile that still turn on just fine. What does that say when HP products die after a year? What does that say about Dell? They're 15, 20 years old, they're still chugging along. While selling PCs still accounts for about half the revenue, the real business of Dell is infrastructure, the digital kind. Michael once said he'll care about Dell even when he's dead. That's the case for my business too. I feel like I can't die because I've got too much to do, and I got to take care of my baby here, this business. I got to take care of my people and keep fighting the industry. Steve Jobs was like that as well. And it was a shame that a couple years after Steve Jobs died, they ran out of his ideas in his notebook, apparently, and Tim Cook turned it into a rental scandal organization, in my professional opinion. Anyway, so the interviewer says, I found Dell to be affable but firm, because he has self-control. He deflected hard questions with a smile. I asked whether he'd like to comment on the fall of Intel, which is a key partner. Right, and I've talked about this before, where Intel made processors for computers since late 80s, early 90s. They were really a household name in the 90s when their stock took off, right? But in the next couple of years, we're going to see ARM take over. And every time you see something in my industry, no one shares anything. It's a monopoly, right? So Intel's monopoly is going to fall, and then a whole different paradigm comes along, which is ARM, and it's a whole different paradigm. So I asked whether he'd like to comment on the fall of Intel, which is one of his key partners, and he says no. And I asked if he's excited about President Trump, and he said, I try to stay out of politics. That's cool. This guy has self-control, and he's quiet, and that's such a beautiful thing. He keeps his mouth shut. That's wonderful, holy, in fact. What Dell really wants to talk about is computers. He's an infrastructure company now. He sells racks of servers, like their PowerEdge lineup of servers, powered by NVIDIA's latest chips. Okay? I talked about this before, right? How you have a CPU and a GPU. Your CPU is your general purpose processor, your central processing unit. It's versatile, it does what it's supposed to. But your GPU is like your subconscious, where it can do repetitive tasks very quickly. So when my buddy Phil was alive, he did a lot of number crunching and simulations, and he was always getting big GPUs. And I said, you're not doing graphics or whatever. Why are you buying GPUs? And he said, because they can do repetitive tasks much more quickly than a CPU. So those are the two biggies. At least there's duopolies in the CPU world of Intel AMD and the GPU world of NVIDIA and ATI AMD. So at least we have duopolies so far. So he has the PowerEdge lineup of servers. Building these souped up machines is a continuation of his early days, working out of his dorm room at the University of Texas, Austin. The world has changed, but Michael Dell is still doing more or less the same thing, only with better components and 120,000 employees. Dell's parents wanted him to be a doctor. He started studying pre-med at UT in 1983. He started an informal business upgrading personal computers. We started out as a company upgrading IBM personal computers, and then we started designing our own computers. And since then, we've evolved to become the largest IT infrastructure company in the world, he says. Right, so back in the 80s and 90s, you had IBM PCs, and then you had IBM Compatible. So Compaq was the first one to crack the code, so they became the first IBM Compatible. Then came Dell, then came HP, and so on and so forth. Much of Dell's story, since he pivoted his company from a PC maker to an IT infrastructure company, has been about making bets that were contrary to prevailing thinking. The most notable was taking his company private in 2013 and piling on huge amounts of debt, which he used to buy makers of hardware and software for the cloud, such as EMC and VMware. At the time, analysts rained down a steady drumbeat of dire predictions on his chances of success, only to be proven wrong 5 years later. when Dell was relisted on the stock market. So he took it private for a while, and I read this article on the show a while back. He employed a guy with a funny name, Egon Durbin. I'll never forget that. And they took it private so they could do whatever restructuring they needed to do, and then they went public again. And again, look at all the disasters. Every possible negotiation that HP has ever done has resulted in the disastrous loss of billions of dollars. And this guy just quietly goes along. He knows exactly what to buy and why. And I'm trying to think of, I had a buddy who worked for one of the companies that Dell acquired. I can't remember which one it was. But anyway, he bought the right tools. He had a $67 billion acquisition of EMC in 2016. It was the largest tech deal in history as far as money's concerned. And it resulted in a company possessing all the bits required to build the most powerful systems that go into data centers. For the most part, the company is a sort of Switzerland in terms of its neutrality toward what runs atop its hardware. And that's important, okay? You remember in economics class or business school, how they talk about the gold rush, right? And there's a lot of people out there who want to go look for the gold themselves. But then there's smarter people who say, you know what? I'll sell you the shovel and the pickaxe. So you go do whatever you want. You take the risk. I'm going to have a sure thing here. I'm going to make money for sure. I'm going to sell you the shovel and the pickaxe. So he sells these servers to anyone who wants to do anything. And, half of these guys are going to fail out there. They're all prospectors, and they're all just mindlessly, desperately chasing whatever trend is out there because someone at a sports bar told them to. So Dell says, you know what, I'll sell you the equipment, you go do whatever you want with it. So he's really the smarter one. It turns out, in the age of AI, there's a tremendous demand for racks of servers and huge arrays of storage. Right, AI isn't magic, okay? AI is just evil software that runs on a server somewhere, okay? And by the way, these servers take up massive amounts of power. Each rack of servers is a stack of computers about the size of a bookshelf. These racks are crammed together inside the vast data centers where the internet actually resides. And the most power-hungry ones for training AI can consume as much power as 100 average American homes. They generate so much excess heat that they have to be liquid-cooled. Each one costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Dell won't say exactly how much. Think about it. And I bet you his profit margins are a lot better than a car manufacturer, okay? He's just making a pile of metal the size of a bookshelf with a bunch of chips inside of it. Sure, I know there's a lot that goes into that, right? I'm not downplaying, but if he sells one of these things for $100,000 a piece, it's incredible. And people are just knocking down the door trying to get these things. Incredible. OpenAI's latest chatbot, GPT 4.0, was trained on about a petabyte of data. And his company sold storage arrays capable of 120,000 petabytes. Okay, so 1 petabyte of data represents all the text on the open internet and the transcripts of 1 million hours of YouTube videos plus countless images. Dell went from having 30 to 40 customers buying servers for AI up to 2,000 customers, and it'll probably be 4,000 in another couple quarters. So let's do the math here. Calculator. 4,000 times, let's say $120,000 for the server. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's 480 million. So that's something. Plus all the normal companies that are buying his servers. Revenue in Dell's server business grew 58% last quarter. 58% in a quarter! Imagine the returns. It's incredible. And 80% the quarter before. Mostly because the world just can't stop producing more and more and more and more and more and more data at an ever faster rate. Again, that's all waste. It's all clutter. It's all digital clutter. 99% of the information out there is garbage or chaff or spam or useless stuff. And they're all paying him. He's laughing his way to the bank. It's awful that humanity is just so desperate and stupid, but at least he's profiting from it, right? I'm here trying to tell people to calm down, but at least he's profiting from it. All those short-form videos, social media posts, hours of streaming entertainment, cloud gaming services, and fire hoses. That's the word, fire hoses of consumer tracking data. Yep, have to go somewhere after all. Fire hoses of consumer tracking data, like all that stuff that Microsoft Edge is sucking out of every victim on the planet. That has translated into an insatiable demand for storage and computers to process it. And record revenue for Dell. The company was called on to provide much of the hardware inside Colossus, the new AI supercomputer built by Elon Musk's new AI company in Memphis, Tennessee. It's an amazing engineering feat, says Dell. He placed incredible demands on us. Dell has been inside that data center with its endless rows of blinking, humming server racks holding 100,000 NVIDIA chips. When I asked him what it looked like, he deadpanned. It looks like a Dell commercial. I love it. That dry humor. I know people like that. Growth of this magnitude for a company as long as in the tooth as Dell leads naturally to the question of whether it's sustainable. AI companies, well, no, I mean, he's adapting, so that's fine, right? Look at Nintendo and Nickelodeon and Toyota. Those are companies who did one thing 100 years ago and then adapted completely and changed themselves completely and now are successful in different things. So it's possible. AI companies are now racing each other to build out ever more powerful clusters of computers to train next-generation AIs. And cloud hyperscalers are smashing all records for capital expenditures on more data centers, right? And again, they're all rolling the dice. They're all placing their bets on this quote-unquote gambling table, okay? They're all taking risks. But there are many questions about whether sufficient demand from end users for AI will manifest in a way that'll justify the historic investment. Okay, that's true. No one actually wants any of this. Even if they do create a successful AI machine, no one actually wants it, and no one's actually going to use it in the right way, and no one actually needs it, and they're not going to be able to figure out how to make any money on it, aside from charging people to use the premium version and then giving the cheapy one for free. No one wants any of this stuff. Dell says he thinks we're just at the start of what will be hockey stick growth for the adoption of AI. Yeah, I'll say 80% growth in 1 quarter, that's like drawing a hockey stick on a graph, right? But he adds, I also believe that any technology that is sufficiently game-changing, by definition, there are going to be some excesses and some mistakes that are made. Okay, well said, Dell. What he's saying is they're all going to take risks, and not all of them are going to succeed. But he's going to succeed because he's just selling them the shovels and the pickaxes. My name is Mark Anthony Arena. I'm so glad you joined me today. Again, I hope you have a prosperous new year. Stay tuned. We're going to do more catch-up style, reading these articles quickly and blazing through them. We're also going to have more fascinating special guests, of course. We'll get Dr. Mike back on here to make us laugh, do some more articles. We'll torment some more scammers. And thanks so much. Talk to you next week. thecomputerexorcist.com.